I thought I'd jump on today and do a video in relation to demonstration. The demonstration that I would like to talk about is, I don't really know what to call it. I can't really give it a name, but what I can do is talk about certain things that happened that were not experiences, but was the presence, the loving, caring, misunderstood, attributeless God. This God is called the self-awareness, Christ conscious. You can't really put a name on the totality of life. I know we call it the never-changing, and then we say there is the changing, but it's the informationless God. It takes no seeking. There are no questions. It just is. And the first time that I remember having this encounter, I was between the age of, 5 and 7. And there was an old lady that used to chase me and my friend when we used to pick some flowers off a tree that was near to her home. And the one day, this old lady she came out of her home and she had a kettle. And she was asking if anybody can put some water in her kettle and heat her kettle for her. And I remember all my friends ran and they screamed, and I would have run and screamed with them, but something stopped me. Just this, it wasn't a force, it wasn't forceful, it was just spontaneous, present, now moment. What happened next was not predestined, it wasn't thought about, it just happened, meaning there is no doer. I took the lady's kettle and I took it home, and my mum said I should get the kettle out of the house because it wasn't very clean and she didn't know where I got it from, and she didn't know what I was doing. But this authority came from little Amanda and said the old lady needs some water in the kettle and she needs it heating up. And instantly my dad intervened and told my mum that you shouldn't tell a child off, and all of this happened. Now, the story in and of itself is just a story, but what really took place was the presence of God saw a need, and there was a vessel that was available, and that vessel was used to display the kindness of life. I can categorically tell you now that there was no emotions, there was no thinkingness, there was nothing, there was no commentary, nothing. It was subdued, gentle silence that met the need of an old lady. And when that happened, the one thing that I knew is that this is authority and this is power, impersonal authority and impersonal power. There was just a knowing. Many years later, I ended up in a life of addiction, abuse, homelessness, prison. The story it's just a story. And I remember meeting another addict and I didn't like her. Don't know why, I just didn't like her and she didn't like me. After knowing this addict, maybe 3 months later, she collapsed and died right in front of me. And at the time, I was more focused on, getting myself better because I was poorly detoxing. And yet again, I'm sat around other people that are doing drugs. I'm waiting for drugs. And then all of a sudden, there was just a looking, noticing, getting up, going over, resuscitating. And it was all done in silence. There was no doer. I was not thinking anything. There was no thoughts, nothing. It just happened. And I remember being fully present, fully aware as this happened, but having no thoughts, Not even, no thoughts, not even I'm a body, nothing. There was just, it was just informationless. And I remember looking, and she'd come round. I remember getting up, sitting back in my seat and carrying on as if nothing never happened. There are many incidents that I experienced as an addict and coming out of addiction, sort of 2011, 2012, so forth. Real, profound, informationless demonstration. Now, I haven't come on here today to talk about the demonstration per se, but what I will say is that was the workings of God Almighty. Informationless. It didn't matter how many prayers I'd prayed. It didn't matter how many worship songs I sung. It didn't matter about anything. In fact, most of the time that happened, it come from nowhere. Pure, spontaneous, intuitive knowing, but not by a person. So the message in today's video is spiritual practices are fine, but they're nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with who you are. Yes, they'll give you insights. You can learn how to meditate for an extra hour than the person sat next to you. You can understand all insights. But upon deep reflection, the realization, it's not about resting in a certain filter, although that is a nice experience. It's not about working out the mind, working out energies. It's not about any of that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not about that. Stop seeking. Just stop seeking. We don't know anything. I'll tell you what we do know. We know the information that comes in through the five senses. We know the information that comes in through the mind. We know the information that we've stored in our hearts. But if you experience deep sleep, all the information that you know, even the profound insights, how to, when you drop this body in bed and this body goes into what we call deep sleep, where is all of that profound knowledge and knowing and insights? Where is it? It can't be taken into deep sleep. And this has been a contemplation for many months. I often say all this knowing how to rest in effortless being, knowing how to show somebody how to overcome a challenge, or to point out you're not that, you're not that, you are this. And every night, every single night, it's forgotten. So the teachings that the world is an illusion, the teachings that you are not the mind. When life used this vessel to demonstrate power, authority, impersonal love, informationless, wordless demonstration, there was no knowledge of God and no knowledge of Amanda. It's indescribable. And so my message today is do all of your spiritual practices, do your resting in effortless being. You know, nobody is saying that it's wrong, because you're not going to sit there like a cabbage and do nothing. But stop seeking. Just stop seeking. Just stop. How do you stop seeking? Like this. Stop. Drop everything. Everything that you think you know. Examine that thinkingness. Because all we've got is information. And when you backtrack that information, it's coming from knowledge. And that knowledge can only come in through certain portals, because all we've really got is perception, because it's the perceiving or perception that is there first, and then the thing shows up. The best teacher is silence. What if whatever you're going through, or whatever you think you're going through, what if that is the perfection? What if that is it? What if this is it? Because the only thing that tells us that this is not it is information. I meet people online, and the confusion. Well, this teacher said it's this, and this non-dual teacher said this, and this teacher said that. And all they are talking about is information. How you know thyself is through demonstration. Because those are only 2 incidents that I've mentioned. When you self-reflect on life, you're either going to be met with a memory of an experience or demonstration. Those 2 things that I mentioned were not experiences. There was no experiencer. It was demonstration. And that's the potential and possibility for everyone. It's through the demonstration that you know the potential and possibility for your body-mind. And if you ponder, meditate on that, you will come to realize that it is everything that you have been seeking for. It's attributeless, it's non-judgmental, it has no past, and it certainly has no future. It's not keeping a record of right and wrongs. It just is its life source. And I think it's very rude to give it a name. Stop seeking. What if this right now, whatever this is, what if this is the perfection and this is it? Because on top of this, we cover it with information. You've already got the seed of how to eat, sleep, walk, dance, work. You've already got the seed in you to do that. The program has already been downloaded for you to act as a human. What if that is it? Because any kind of seeking takes you away from the availability for potential and possibility. Any kind of seeking. So if you just stop seeking, if thoughts are coming up, if feelings are coming up, if narrations are coming up, why don't you just leave them alone? Easier said than done. No, it's not. Just stop seeking and accept this moment. Before I go, I just want to talk about one story where humility, real humility, was demonstrated. It was many years ago, and I went to see somebody, a female, and we was both in that dark, lonely world. And I went to see her, and she was coughing. She just kept on coughing. And she was expecting some men to come round and give her a good hiding because she'd lost somebody's money and somebody's drugs. And she said, Amanda, I've give up. And there was a moment when we was just silent. Now, neither of us knew God. Neither of us were living godly lives, but there was just silence. And I remember her home. I don't know how human beings could live in such conditions. It was damp, it was full of mould, it was untidy, but it was her home. And she said, I've just got to go to hospital, I've got a hospital appointment and I'm going to book in now. And I was about to leave and she said, oh, I've got one polo mint, do you want to share it with me? And she broke the polo mint in half, her little grubby fingers. And she shared the polo mint with me. A polo mint, do you know what a polo mint is? It's a tiny, 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 tiny sweet mint. And we shared the polo mint. We just stood in silence. I left, and then she left to go to hospital. And I don't know, 2 days later, I saw 2 of her daughters and they were crying. And they said, Mum's gone. I said, what do you mean? They said she passed away in hospital. She had something to do with her lungs, emphysema, I think. And the one daughter held me and said, thank you. And I looked. She went, thank you. And she had a look of knowing. She knew something that I did not know. And it was only years later when I sat and reflected, and knowing the power of God, knowing the loving being that we so often overlook. And she knew that even though she wasn't there, there was compassion, silence, impersonal agape for both vessels, this vessel and that vessel. That's when I met God. I didn't meet him in a church. I didn't meet him in prayer. That's when I met him. When I did not know who I was, who he was, and yet there was no seeking, just being. There are lots of stories that I can tell you about the supernatural love of God. There are some funny stories. There are some magical, mysterious stories that I don't think I'd put on YouTube because I don't think you'd believe, you know, real magic. But in and amongst all of those, I said, if this is what I've come here to do, to demonstrate potential and possibility, I'm here, Lord, use me. One of the cleanest methods, if we can call it a method, that I know is total and utter impersonal acceptance and silence. Yes, we've got lives to continue with. You know, I've got up this morning, I've done the housework, I've danced around the house, I've done some work online. But in the middle of all of it, the alpha and the omega of it is complete and utter silence. And it is the most blissful, most peaceful, most misunderstood teaching available. So my advice is stop seeking. Just stop. Stop seeking. Because we will never find what we think we're looking for. It's when we stop, give up the search, that the potential and possibility to have life force, power and authority move through the being to touch humanity. Thank you. I'm pressing away at my button and it won't take me off the screen. I'm going to have to lean forward. Thank you and bless you.